Welcome back to another episode of SaaS Buyers Club. I'm your host, Omeed.
And I'm your co-host, Joe.
I'm Hosam. Omeed, Joe, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Hosam, thanks for being here. And we always start these episodes having our guests tell us a little bit about themselves. So would love to hear a little bit about you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Director of Strategy over at Partner Hero. It's an outsourcing business. I come from a customer support background and have built a couple of small businesses along the way, anywhere from freelancing to building a service business, which I recently exited.
Very cool. Yeah. And so why don't you start by telling us a little bit about Partner Hero? It sounds like that's what you're currently doing, and we'd love to learn a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah, so Partner Hero is a 2,500 person company. It's an outsourcing business. So imagine our clients are companies like Etsy. They would come to us when they have an influx of tickets and say, hey, we need 100, 200 customer support agents, and we would fulfill those needs. So that's their traditional business model. I joined the company after selling my last company to them to help them bring on new services that we could offer those same customers, right? So not only are we doing outsourcing, but today we're able to do implementation of CRMs like Zendesk and Gorgeous, and soon Salesforce and maybe Intercom. And then we're also integrating AI into our stack. So we don't want to be the BPO that gets left behind, the outsourcing business that gets left behind. We want to make sure that we embrace AI and add it as a layer, because we do understand that it's super important to have that in your customer support stack. So I'm helping out with that initiative specifically.
Very cool. So is there a SaaS aspect to Partner Hero, or is there a platform, for example, or anything like that?
So we're actually in the middle of building some software products. Can't share too much about that just yet, but that is another area that we're going to dive into pretty soon.
Very cool. But so tell us a little bit more about this outsourcing aspect. So you mentioned Etsy, you mentioned, some of these like platform implementations like Salesforce, for example.
Right.
So when would a company want to outsource to Partner Hero?
Yeah, so there's a couple of scenarios. The one that's probably most common is an e-commerce business that just is experiencing hyper growth, or its peak season is coming around the corner, like November. They're going to expect way more tickets, influx of people checking on their orders, wanting refunds, wanting exchanges. So typically outsource during that time. But then we're also seeing companies just not wanting to do customer support themselves and wanting to outsource 100% of their customer support to another company. And that's where we'd come in and fulfill that need for them.
Gotcha. So how many businesses that you work with are SaaS businesses? I
would say we have a really mixed bag. And I just joined the company earlier this year, so I might not have that exact number. I like to say it's like anywhere from 25 to 50% of the customers we work with.
Joe, you got any questions or?
Yeah, I definitely would like to dive into the acquisition aspect of sort of basically your acquisition. Yeah. And more so from just a procedure perspective. A big thing that I like to talk about and we like to talk about is what is the process for somebody selling their business? And, there's a lot of different ways that can be done. I'm already aware that in your case, it was a specific type of acquisition. And also, we like to talk about, hey, what are some issues you ran into that you guys had found solutions for? Or what are some things you learned along the process that you totally wish you had knew earlier on, or you think that somebody else would really benefit from? Somebody else meaning another person potentially selling their business.
Yeah, so I would say my case was probably a unique case. I started freelancing maybe 5-6 years ago, just one person business that I started, and I was doing it while working full time, right? I never thought that I would turn it into a company. I went on Upwork, got a couple of low paying jobs. One thing turned into another. I landed, Snapchat as a client, as a one person business, because what I was doing was so niche. I was doing consulting for a specific software called Zendesk. And they came to me and they said, hey, we don't have a Zendesk admin at the moment. Could you fill in? So I took them as a client, eventually got blockchain.com as a client as well. Simply Hired, which is a child company of Indeed. And I was doing this all by myself while working a full-time job.
And what's Zendesk? It's like a customer ticket support platform?
Yeah, it's a CRM built specifically for post-sale customer support interaction. So when you write an email to a company asking for support, it lands in their Zendesk environment. But in Zendesk, what you could do is build automations and improve that customer experience so it's not a dull experience for the customer receiving support. So yeah, I continued to do that. It felt like I was working 2 full-time jobs, right? I was doing Zendesk consulting and working. Yeah, I was working in customer support at a software company called Abstract in San Francisco at the time. So it was my first remote job, and I felt like I was able to balance that more because of the advantage of working remote. So
and they let you moonlight like that?
Yeah, there was no conflict.
Okay.
I was doing Zendesk for them as well. So the more I did outside of work, the more I learned to do for them at work, right?
Yeah, you were like, I do it here. I could do it for you too. Like
exactly.
You know?
Yeah. So and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I ended up leaving Abstract and they became my client afterwards. So I like to keep that relationship. That happened with 2 of my employers actually. So I continued to build the company. I brought on 2 of my buddies. They're contractors. They were also working full-time, but I needed a couple of extra hands. At the 5-year mark, I felt like I was just doing way too much. I do enjoy working a full-time job. I feel like I get to learn a lot in new roles. So I said, you know what, let me go ahead and shut down my company. I think I've had enough. Still had a book of clients, over 100 clients, some really big names, as I mentioned. And I've been following Andrew, the founder of Acquire.com, for a while on LinkedIn. I was like, I think it would be funny to post this on Acquire.com, which was MicroAcquire at the time, and see what happens, right? So I posted it for a very low 5-figure amount. And I was getting a couple of bites. And then I saw at the top right, there was like, oh, speak to a broker. I clicked on that and I saw Christine's picture from the Magnolia firm. Contacted her. Luckily, she took my deal. She typically does deals in the millions of dollars, but she took my deal and she eventually got me 10 times the amount what I posted my business for, right? So that means I had no experience in ever selling a business. I had no experience in evaluating the company, right? So those were, to your question, Joe, those were my first mistakes, right? Or my very first mistake was probably thinking about just shutting down the business and not thinking it had any assets that would be valuable for sale. So those were a couple of mistakes that I made. The thing that I did correctly was hire a broker to help me get through the entire process. And then once I was working with Christine, everything was pretty smooth from there. And I think you also asked around the mistakes there. I think one thing I didn't do in my business that I wish I would have was create a recurring revenue model. They were all one-off projects. So when it came to valuation and when it came to selling the business, it was a tough sale because there was no monthly recurring. It was just new clients, one-time fees, and then they would move on after a couple of months.
I see.
Definitely want to talk about that. But
before
we talk about that though, so to get clear, like you had like 100 clients. I think why you wanted to sell your business went over my head though. Why did you want to sell this business that was doing well?
So as I mentioned, I think maybe before we even got on the call, it's not a SaaS product. It's not an educational digital asset product. Everything that I sold, I had to fulfill. And it was a draining job. And I didn't have the background in hiring and training, other consultants and contractors. And to be honest with you, even in my roles today, I don't like to manage anybody. I've always been an individual contributor. So that's not something I wanted to do. My options were dump the business or build a business with many employees that I would have a headache of managing. So I said, I'd rather go with option A,
I think that's really important to call out, specifically, Omeed, kind of just touching a little bit more on the subject. It's like there is very often the thing, well, so in SaaS, most founders, I don't know the statistic, I'm just assuming from personal experience, most founders are technical founders. And unless they do choose to evolve to, take on that managerial role or take on sort of that needed business education, then they very often do find themselves in that sort of conundrum that you found yourself in different ways, mind you, but yours being one of them, just being like, hey, this other stuff isn't something you do. And how can you really benefit from a potential exit in that scenario. I really like your curiosity, though, kind of pulling back to that. I like how you were just down to check it out.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people would be willing to do that because it kind of sounds like if I wasn't an M&A lawyer, and I saw that, I probably wouldn't have clicked it. I would have been like, this sounds like something I'm doing. Probably going to screw it up. I'm not going to do it. I'm not even sure I would have contacted the broker either. I would have been like, who are these people on the internet?
Right.
And so that's just my perspective I'm saying out there. But like, I love how you were so curious in wanting to go check that out and then getting expert advice. And that brought you to this great solution, which was you got a lot more than you were expecting and you got to exit the business. You didn't have to go take on the other growth type stuff that you didn't want to do. Exactly. Do you feel like you made out well with the whole transaction? Kind of just asking that quick little question.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I sold my company. I, again, made multiple six figures, which I did not expect to make. Now I'm working for the company that purchased the name of my company was Support Ops. So Partner Hero, where I work now, purchased Support Ops. And now we've integrated that where I get to do the fun things, which are, marketing and sales and strategy for that segment. While we have an entire team dedicated to doing fulfillment, which is the stuff I didn't want to do, right? So it's been like I think it's been like a perfect journey for Support Ops and myself. I think we both found a really good home.
That's awesome. No, okay, I love that. I just wanted to ask because I was sitting there saying like, oh, everything's great. But I was like, well, I didn't ask that directly. So I just wanted to ask you how it's been. And that sounds cool. Kind of taking the step back to what we were talking about earlier, Omeed. Why don't I throw the mic over to you, Omeed, to take us in that direction?
Yeah. So, what's coming up for me in this moment actually is like you posted it for a certain number. Christine thought that she could sell it for a higher number. It sounds like there's a really valuable lesson in understanding multiples there. What did that journey look like, sound like, so on and so forth?
Yeah. So the reason I posted it so low is because I looked at the company for as if I was going to be a buyer, right? And I asked myself, okay, what am I really buying? A website, maybe a domain, and some brand recognition, right? Like whoever would have bought it would have had to continue to do the work themselves because it was a one-person business, right? So I felt like, okay, let me just post it for 5 figures. That would be a nice little paycheck that I could get. But then when I worked with Christine, she looked at, I was listed in Zendesk's marketplace as a top partner with over 25-star reviews. I had a client list of active clients that wanted to re-engage. Again, I told you 100 plus customers, right? So she looked more at the potential for the buyer and less of like, what are they exactly getting today, right? So the multiple ended up being, I think, 1 to 1.5 times the revenue within the year. And I was listing it originally for 1/10 of, what I was making a year. So that was eye-opening. We didn't get like a SaaS multiple, right?
Sure.
But I was happy to make what I made in 1 year in one transaction, essentially.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'll throw it back over to you, Omeed.
Yeah. So that was like, that was the lesson that you learned in how to get, 10x what you originally asked for. And then talk to us about the process of locating the buyer. What did that look like?
This is also unique to me. I think both of you are probably going to be familiar with Justin Welch. He writes on LinkedIn and he teaches people how to basically grow their LinkedIn. So a year prior to listing
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, gotcha. Omeed, do you know Justin?
I actually don't know him either, but I'm like, all right, right after this, I'm gonna go add him.
Yeah, he's probably has the most followers on LinkedIn, but he's also a solopreneur. Went through like consulting, started education business by himself, sells courses, whatever. But one of the courses is how to grow on LinkedIn. So a year prior to listing my business, I took his course, which is a 2-hour course. I highly recommend it, and started growing my audience. So I had a couple of thousand followers at that time, and I've been talking specifically about customer support and implementation of Zendesk for a year. So I had a little buzz going around. A lot of Zendesk employees knew me. So when I started working with Christine, I said, you could work on inbounds. That's fine. Do you mind if I shoot a couple of founders a quick DM on LinkedIn, right? And I literally DM'd every founder that owned a customer support product or service and said, hey, would you be interested in acquiring a one-person Zendesk implementation business? Sent it out to 20 people. I got a couple of replies. One of them was the founder of Partner Hero. I'd never spoke to him before. We just followed each other on LinkedIn, and he's like, oh, I really like your content, by the way. And that's essentially why he answered the DM. And then we went through the entire sales process, and it all started with a cold DM. So I'm a big believer in cold outreach. And then building your network. Those two things really helped me. And then Christine took it from there. So I kind of, to sum it up, I found my own buyer, essentially.
Yeah. But also it being based on, sort of your prior content marketing strategy anyways, getting value off of your existing network, and then ultimately doing that cold outreach and sort of knowing how to communicate. At least you were able to kind of communicate what you were looking to do, or by that point, Christine had already told you, here's what the product is. Oh, okay. So you had to get advice on how to communicate what was being sold.
Right. We already had packaged the acquisition, and all I had to do was pitch it. So my background is in not only customer support, but sales and marketing. So we were able to get on a couple of calls and quickly pitch the business at that point.
And I emphasize that point too, because a lot of people do they'll send just the not a good enough message when they're trying to contact even their own network or closer network to present what they're trying to sell, what the price is, what the value prop is. Let me give you an example. It's like, I'm thinking of selling my business for insert high number here. And then, not saying anything about, but we have customers and we have these revenues and we have these expertises, and missing out other good things. So there's a lot of that which people would do if they didn't have a broker or didn't have those marketing chops. So that's why I emphasize that there. The process makes sense. Omeed, did you have any kind of bite down questions into the process of selling this business?
Yeah. So it sounds like you're the perfect seller, because not only are you 100% ready to sell, which that's another thing that I definitely want to talk about, because, there's a whole process around there, but you sell your own business in addition to alongside the broker, pushing and selling your business. That's next level motivated seller, and just awesome to see, you found your own seller. That's super cool. I'm sure Christine is very happy with you as a client as well.
Yeah. No, it was great. I learned so much from that firm. I could have never done it by myself. And if I ever exited another company, I would never do it by myself, right? There's so much more involved than just I found a buyer and, and you guys know. So
yeah.
Okay, how does Partner Hero feel about the fact that you totally would have let go of the business for much less than what they bought it for?
I think it was a really good investment for them. And they actually offered over asking because they definitely wanted the company, right? So that was another thing I didn't mention. It wasn't that much more, but they wanted to make sure they lock it in. And I think this is the point I was trying to make before, based on what you said, Joe, and Omeed, about being perfect seller. The founder knows the business the most, right? So if a broker goes someplace and says, hey, we want to sell the business, the motivation is that they're going to make a commission, right? Mm-hmm. So when the founder approaches a buyer for a business or a potential buyer, they want to share with that company the benefits that they're going to get alongside with it. So how I pitched it to Partner Hero is, you're going to add this brand new service to your existing model, and you could sell that service to all of your existing clients, because all of Partner Hero's clients use Zendesk or something similar. So we could automatically just send an email to everybody and say, hey, now you could get this wonderful service along with your outsourcing service. So they also saw the potential. So for them spending 5 figures or 6 figures, it really didn't matter because, and to be honest with you, we've already exceeded that in the couple of months that we've integrated, right? So I kind of think that maybe I could have sold for a little bit more.
Oh, that's funny. No. I like that. The way I want to echo that. Yeah. So back to your first point though, about Were they upset that they paid more? I think it's pretty common that people are, they're basing their decision based off of value judgment, not necessarily like budgeting purposes. Like this was like an opportunity for them to get revenue, not save and not cut costs.
Right.
In other words, it's kind of a common thing where people are like, oh, I can get this big multiple. Gosh, aren't they going to be pissed? And it's like, no, because they're already doing their projections anyways, based off how much they're going to make off the business and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that that's the outcome here. Going then now to your point that you made about, maybe you could have sold it for more. That's really interesting. I was actually going to ask you, I was going to say, hey, as part of your sale, and only if you're allowed to refer to this as part of your sale, did you have an earnout agreement?
To be quite honest with you, Joe, I don't know what an earnout agreement is.
Okay. No, that's fine. I hear you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Because what I'm trying to get at there is part of the sale was definitely future performance by the buyer. So if you're a founder and you're looking to sell your business and you're telling the buyer, hey, but I'm going to come on and I'm going to earn you guys more too in the future. Well, what founders in that hypothetical typically negotiate for is also an earnout agreement, which is basically an agreement that says, hey, I'm going to do stuff for you in the future too. I know you can't really say right now that you're going to pay me a commission on the next 4 years of sales, but as I make those sales or make that revenue for you, I want you to pay me extra. It's also kind of just like a bonus, like if you had a cash bonus plan or other type of bonus plan, similar to that. So that's what I'm raising there. And that's kind of something just to emphasize too for audience people who are founders to think about, okay, what am I selling and how can I make sure I maximize how much I'm getting for that? In your case, maybe there's nothing worse than hindsight's 20/20 on a deal, right? It is what it is. So, and I'm sure, and I know you're happy with what it is, but talking again there, it's important to kind of maximize your return and stuff. And there's a lot that goes in that little quip you made or, point you made at the end there. What do you think about that? Does that make sense to you? Did you get a bonus plan?
So the initial agreement is that I was supposed to stay on for a certain amount of months to transition the knowledge, right? So there was nothing about certain milestones that I had to hit, right? And then after I was there as a contractor for a couple of months, that's when we decided that I should be there full time, right? So it wasn't essentially a traditional acqui-hire, but I felt like Support Ops had a great home. I really liked working with that company as a contractor. So let me give it a shot as a full-time employee. And it's been amazing. So I have no regrets for selling it for the price that I sold it. I'm actually really grateful that they gave me over asking. Christine got me 10x what I expected. And again, I'm at a wonderful job, making a great salary for what I do. And overall happy. So no regrets there.
Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear. And it's definitely a positive story. Changing the kind of sidestepping that a little bit and going back to the question I had about a cash bonus plan, however, your employer might not I guess I was going to say they might not want to be happy about me mentioning this, but actually they wouldn't care you talking to a lawyer, it is what it is. I was going to say that maybe something in the future that you would discuss with your employer, if you don't have one yet, is a cash bonus plan based off of your performance. If you are doing that type of sales and marketing stuff, that can be directly correlated with revenue milestones. For people who are doing types of like technical delivery work that's not directly correlated with revenue milestones or cost cutting, then setting milestones under a cash bonus plan is typically more difficult and less common, though people do that there also. So that's something for me to just throw out there. I'm not your lawyer, but as a lawyer, it's something for me to just throw out there as like, oh, that's something you could keep in mind. And for other people in that situation, it's something they could think about too. Because employers are happy to motivate their employees. Like say you're doing great now, how about 18 months later, you're doing even greater,
right?
And you're delivering even more value. That's the perfect time for when people would have that conversation, or maybe even earlier than 18 months later. And employers are happy to compensate and motivate people who are high performers, bringing in and being responsible for bringing in revenue. So it's pretty.
Yeah, 100%. And we're in that scenario now, not with my deal, but Omeed, you mentioned that I was a perfect seller. So after working with Christine invited me to work with her on some other deals as well, right? So I'm helping a buddy of mine sell his business now. And part of his exit, which should happen in the next few weeks, he's going to be getting that compensation for additional revenue that he brings. So very similar business model to what I had. One person business, service model, no recurring. So the buyer wants to ensure that, he will continue to bring in revenue. And then also the seller wants to make sure that they're going to get compensated for the extra work that they put in. So Joe, for my case, I didn't know that I was going to join them as an employee, right? And my mind was like, oh, finally I get to leave support ops and it's in good hands now and somebody else will build it. I want to be as minimally involved as possible, right? So that might just mean pass on the knowledge and keep it moving. But obviously it turned out differently. And I think it really depends on the seller, right? Do they want to stay involved for 6 months, 12 months and put in the sweat equity to continue to sell, continue to market, or do they want to be hands off, right? And I think that's when they should make that decision of, well, okay, I want to get compensated for the work I do, and I'm actually going to do good work, right?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Sometimes people do make that decision like later on, like in your case, but it's definitely best like to make that or as early on as possible, because it could go the other way too, where like you find out like 3 months later, you're like, man, I really like working for these guys, but there's just not a role for you there.
Right.
And maybe they thought he didn't want to be here. Maybe you guys wouldn't communicate about that. And maybe they have somebody else ready to do that role. And they're really just offboarding you during the typical M&A transition period.
Right.
So it's really important to have that knowledge up front or to just be communicative about it through the process.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe just dropped 2 huge bombs, like earnout agreements and cash bonuses are 2 tools that founders absolutely need to have in their pockets. And thank you, Joe. That was like fantastic value bombs. Love.
We had this one guy one time. Oh my gosh, I forget the app's name, but he was like selling his high flying SaaS app to Tinder. Was it Tinder, Omeed?
It was one of those dating apps.
It was like, something like that. Yeah. It was like Bumble or Tinder. I don't remember who was going to buy his company. But he was just starting talks with them to sell it. And he came and asked for our advice about, so what can we do? And that was the crux of it. It was a big earnout plus just the acquisition price. And so that's to kind of emphasize that in that case, like he was able to command a very large number on that earnout. And it was a condition decided way up front as part of the deal. And the buyer did want him, like, it's not something that he had to like particularly sell the buyer on because he did have a lot of value to provide, as having been the head of the SaaS business. And so it was a really great way for him to make, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like over 50% of the purchase price just in the earnout alone. I think it might have been over 100% of the purchase price. I can't remember exactly, but this was in the tens of millions. And it was like, we did not represent him in the transaction. We just talked to him about it as initial consulting on the deal structuring. So I don't know what he ended up getting for it. I mean, I wasn't there. But we had talked about it. It was in the millions. And that was a big component of it. That's pretty common for technical founders. In your case, like a technical professional, you were a professional in the space. But technical founders in general, just anybody who's an expert in an area and their business provides that service or that expertise is required as part of the operation of that business. Those are the type of people who can really command earnouts. Like if you're just kind of like a admin staff, so maybe you're kind of a generic COO, but you're the founder, but there's really nothing unique that you're an expert at. Maybe you're a really good operator, but the buyers, they all have good operators. Maybe there's really nothing you can offer. Besides just team cohesion and some other things. So maybe you really can't command as that type of person a higher earnout. But if you're like the guy who invented the thing, you really have to have in your mind from the beginning when you're thinking of selling your business or considering selling a business that, I can get a lot for this, not just for the assets over here, but I can get a lot for my time in the coming years.
Yeah. Thanks for that insight, Joe. And again, that's why we created this podcast, is really to deliver value to founders and to buyers in terms of tools that they can, utilize in their deals. But going back to your deal, Hosam, I actually want to backtrack a little more. So, I heard you say that, you had all these clients, and so you were crushing it in, marketing and sales, which is what you enjoy, but you don't necessarily want to be like a people manager who, so what did that process of getting to that place of like being ready to sell your business look like? Did you just wake up one day and you're like, yeah, this is not it? Like, what did that look like?
I think I tried several different ways to increase revenue, and I just couldn't get past a certain point, right? With my expertise at the time. So again, I would have had to hire more people, which I didn't want to do. I would have to build software, which I didn't know how to do. Yeah, those were really my two options at the time. So I said, okay, I could just grind it out. And a lot of people say this: when you're in a one-person business, you just basically created a job for yourself. So I was technically working a job that, I had to do a lot of sales. I had to do a lot of marketing. I had to do a lot of fulfillment, and I could make that same compensation working with half the energy somewhere else. So I said, okay, if I can't get it past this point, I'm better off just going to, a new job, learning new things, and then upskill, and then start a new business maybe later on in life, where I have those skills, and build a bigger business and learn from my previous mistakes. So I didn't wake up one morning. It was just maybe a year of frustration for not getting past certain revenue, and also burnout from being the only person that's fulfilling the services. And there weren't small companies that I was working with. So
yeah, that sounds like a really organic or natural story too. It's just kind of like you had these hurdles. They weren't things that you felt the need to jump over at that time.
Yeah.
It's kind of, a lot of people are usually in the situation where they've double burned themselves out. They've decided to start jumping over one of those hurdles, and then they're tripping on themselves, and they're like, now I'm going to sell, but maybe they've grown a little bit more, maybe not. Maybe they've incurred even higher costs and made things even look worse.
Yeah.
Maybe they've set aside some of their main business to kind of focus on those growth things and don't succeed. There's a lot of ways that plays out in a bad way and in a good way. But I like how you were just kind of clear-minded with yourself, and you were just like, okay, this is what's in front of me. Here, let's go check out this option of selling it.
Yeah.
You don't need to overtax yourself. I'm definitely sorry, I know you were going to speak there. I'll throw the mic right to you. I was just going to add a last comment, which is I definitely think that a lot of people need to kind of know their expertise and their limits on it. And not just kind of sometimes founders are ready to do the next fumble. They're like, oh, I could figure it out along the way. But sometimes that's not the best choice. Sometimes the choice is just to know where you're at and make a different decision.
Yeah. And just one thing I would add, Joe, another reason that I wanted to exit somehow, whether shutting down the business or selling, is because I knew if I would have continued, the quality of the service that I was going to provide was going to start to go down, right? Because I wasn't really into it anymore. And the last thing I would want is to ruin the reputation that I built over 5 years for the business, and then start delivering less than excellent services to customers, and then go down with having 1-star reviews, 2-star reviews, right? So if you look at support ops in the marketplace now, which is rebranded to Partner Hero, they're all 5 stars. I didn't settle until every customer was happy. And if something went wrong, I made sure I would go back and figure out what it took to make it right. So for the 5 years, I feel like I delivered excellent service, and I didn't want the service to degrade and for me to go down in the books as the guy that exited his company because service was crap at the end, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to salvage that reputation of the company. And then also, if I wanted to network with those businesses again that I was servicing in a future venture, I could easily contact them, and they say, hey, it was great while we had you, and we're happy to bring you on again for a different service, for example.
Yeah, I think that's really professional, and that shows great foresight on your part, just thinking for the best of the business and the customer moving forward. I mean, I can't emphasize how often it is that people choose to sell later than they should. It's just kind of like, you didn't know much about M&A in your case either. So, it makes sense. You would have just shut it down. But it's kind of a hard one when you don't know much about selling a business and you get stuck in that situation and you're just kind of fighting your day to day. So I get why people get to that situation, but yeah, no question there from me, just kind of vibing off of that.
Cool. Yeah, I got another one. So it sounds like, your journey of getting to the place of being ready to sell your business, you crushed it on marketing and sales. You generated 100 clients, but no recurring revenue. It was all the implementation was on your shoulders. It sounds like you tried a few things over the course of a year to, build different kind of business models that would, shift revenue to make it fit more of the lifestyle that you were trying to reach in terms of a certain revenue number balanced with a certain, just quality of life in terms of time and ability to do the things that you love. And so over the course of the year, essentially you got to the place where, had you always known that you're I'm a person that doesn't want to manage people? Have you always known that, this was, the business kind of also accidentally blew up and that you started it, you were oh, hold on a second. This is a business. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. So going even further back in my professional career, I started as a customer support agent and worked as an agent for a while, technical support agent, became a customer support manager. And that's where I realized that I never want to manage people, right? I love leading projects. I love working with others, but I can't spend my entire day, doing one-on-ones and being responsible for other people's work, because that takes away from what I like to do, which is actually doing the work myself. So as I was going through that journey, I realized I didn't want to be a manager. Coincidentally, each one of those jobs, I was the owner of the Zendesk environment. And that's why when I stopped commuting from New Jersey to New York and got my first remote job, I said, let me try some Zendesk consulting on the side. I've been doing it for the last 10 years at my job. Let me look on Upwork and see if there are anybody looking for this type of service. And it was one of their highest in demand services that nobody was really fulfilling.
Oh, I think I've seen that. I don't know. For some reason, you just triggered me and I knew that. That was one of the top ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So Zendesk was on there and it was just, I went and got certified with Zendesk, became an official partner, listed on their marketplace. And that's when it took off. Omeed, to answer your question, I knew that I didn't want to be a manager prior to even starting a company.
Wow. That's so interesting. Knew that you were trying to create a business, but not really trying to, create a business and trying to find balance, and such a journey of discovery, even the process of kind of posting it, what almost seemed like a tongue-in-cheek joke for you on the Acquire platform, where you're let's just see if we could sell this thing. I don't even know, and then it's hold on a second. Okay, let me click this button. Wow, I just made 10x what I thought that I was going to make. I think we've covered the story well of, getting to the place of the transaction. And I love that story of how you found him. So many good sound bites that I'm going to clip up that are going to really, I think, help people in a lot of ways. But yeah, man, tell us some other key takeaways.
Yeah, some takeaways were, or maybe some pieces of advice that I wish I had prior to building the business or selling the business. I would say, I wish I would have built a business with some kind of recurring revenue, right? Doing these one-off projects really didn't allow me to sell the business how I wanted to sell it, or what most founders would want to sell a business for. So I think the next time
what is that? What is
revenue,
that?
It wasn't as easy of a sale as it could have been with the recurring, right? And you could increase multiples, obviously, if you have recurring revenue.
Right.
And then also, when you sell a business that has recurring revenue, there isn't so much emphasis on you continuing with that buyer to bring them in more sales, right? Because they already have revenue and they could go on for a little while until they build their sales team, or you train their sales team. But when you come in with zero recurring, it's kind of like you're rebuilding the company from scratch within a new organization. So definitely would have liked to have some recurring revenue.
Oh, just on that, were you going to mention another key takeaway?
Yeah.
just on that point there, I mean, it also sounds like, you had been 5 years in, is that right?
Yeah.
5 years into the business by that point. It also sounds like you were already 5 years in. You had already had some level of burnout. At that point, it was already too late, it seems, to even decide to change the business model there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I could have changed the model, but I didn't, just because at that point I didn't have the energy or resources to, change up the model at that point. I was just at my limit, I would say, with running that business, and didn't want to reconfigure. Also, that was a main source of income. So, and at that time I wasn't working full time anymore, right? So if I would change the model and the model didn't work, I'd be in trouble with my personal finances. So it was best for me to say, okay, I'm making the conscious decision to stop this business and then jump into a new full-time role.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. And that really takes us back to kind of one of those fundamental points. It might be the fundamental of the fundamental, but I'm still going to call it out as just as a key takeaway here, which is that, it's important to think of your business model at the beginning. And part of that thought process should go into this. I'm not talking about you here. I'm talking about for other people who are selling their businesses or building businesses. Part of that process should take into consideration the potential sellability of that business and the valuation you can get, the multiple you can get. And that's why SaaS is such a big space, because SaaS gets that recurring revenue. A lot of them, I can't even think of one that's on a per project basis, but that's probably, I just cut that part out because I can't tell Omeed. So I'm going to start off where I was a few seconds ago and just saying that. And that's a big part of SaaS. And the recurring revenue is one of the major contributors that enables people to command those high valuation multiples. So that's kind of just a different universe, one could say, than a service business. We're in a service business ourselves. We run a law firm. It is what it is. But that's also something law firms face when they go to potentially selling their law firm, which might sound like a foreign concept, but it's totally a thing. And it's like, if those legal services were recurring and consistent and scalable, law firms would command completely different premiums than they do.
Which some do.
Some, ones with recurring services. Is that
there are law firms that for sure implement recurring revenue models. Legal services, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point to call out. In my head, I just been thinking of traditional firms like us. But yeah, there's people who do that too. So, and anybody out there who's like doing a service business and thinking, I might sell it in the future, or is this an option for me? I guess that's a really great thing to keep in mind now, and being like, okay, you can choose to change your business model earlier on, then potentially, maybe you're still early on in, or you have more resources, or you still have a lot of energy, and you haven't reached that stage where you just can't take that risk or contribute any more to the business, which is totally reasonable, by the way, Sam. It makes a lot of sense. A lot of people make that decision. Building out a different business model is kind of like building a new business.
Exactly.
So it's like, if you're at the point where you're trying to exit, that's definitely not the point where you're trying to build it from the get-go. So
exactly.
I get it. It makes sense to me. You had another key takeaway though that I threw you off of because I wanted to bite in a little bit, but why don't you kind of take
everything you just mentioned actually was a good segue into what I wanted to say here is I think first-time founders, and for myself, for the next business I build, should think about building a business that's sellable, right? So Omeed and I were talking about it before this call, starting backwards, right? So thinking about, thinking about the exit before the building the business. And I never thought about it that way. I would always come up with an idea and say, this is the business I want to keep forever. I never thought about exiting. Now I think about everything backwards. So let's say I want to sell a business in the next 3 years for $3 million, right? At a multiple of 3x. That means I got to get it to $1 million in revenue. So I look at my options now. How do I build $1 million business, or a business that's going to generate $1 million a year, and jot down those ideas and then figure out problems that could be solved to generate that amount of money? Maybe it's high ticket items that I could be selling at recurring model, or an education business, which I'm actually building right now. It's a course model, and just essentially working backwards from where you want to be in 3 to 5 years. That at least was my takeaway from this entire sale.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really valuable point that you raised there. I mean, like, especially how you're kind of like, now you really get it and you're ready to apply it. I always had, and I'm not going to spout it out now, but I always had in my own head, and this is with the hat, like, I hate when people say, oh, I have the hat on of a lawyer,
Right.
but not the hat on of how would a CEO. I actually hate when people say that, and I was about to do it. I want to do it anyways. So when I have or had previously the hat on of somebody building a business, because I built a few businesses and sold them before too. And I'm really into tech, really into SaaS, and it's just kind of, a lot of my friends are programmers, so we're all just nerds together.
Nice.
That's just is what it is. And so when I have that founder hat on, I always had a list of points which would go into my consideration as to like the value of the business or the value of the product line. And sort of obviously the recurring model is a big piece of that. There's other important things too, which are very important for people to think about when they consider sellability of a business. And that includes if you have moats, including, for example, if there's IP, like in a services business, usually there's not IP, but there may be in certain circumstances. If you're using some tools you developed in-house, for example, that you need to go get IP over. But in SaaS, an IP moat is usually a pretty big one. Another one is just if you have, for example, a lot of proprietary data or access to different data, that can be a moat in itself, having that. Scale itself is a moat. There's a lot of different ways one can get a moat, but that's a big different key component of thinking about sellability. And obviously, we've talked before about what's your churn rate. So there's that. There's other factors. I said I wasn't going to list them all, so I'll stop there. But there's several factors that people do need to take into consideration with sellability. I'll actually throw it back over to you now and ask, is there any other factor that you learned from your experience selling your business that you would totally or are going to take into consideration in the future when you think about building a business for the exit, for the sale?
Yeah, I think the big one for me was my personal network and my personal brand was very tied into the business. And although that was great when I was in the business, but once you remove yourself from the business, it's useless to the buyer, right? So
right. It's so
you could build both brands in parallel and play off of each other, but you can't be the brand itself because it's very difficult to sell at that point. So a lot of people were hiring support ops knowing that they were going to get me. The minute that you would swap me with somebody else, they would know, and you would be using support ops as, bait and switch. So,
yeah.
So
what would you do differently? So if you could go back, what would you have done differently?
I would have probably talked about the company more and less about me doing the services. And when I would sell, I could say that, hey, I'm going to pass this on to my team of contractors or a team of consultants, even if they didn't exist, even if I was just doing the work myself, because that gives my customer the impression that it's not me just doing the work, right? Because then when I remove myself from that equation, they feel like they're going to get a lower quality product or lower quality service.
Was a big aspect of that, I hear what you're saying there with that aspect of it, was a big aspect of that like all the online or was a lot of the marketing done just from you in your personal capacity and not like through the corporate account, or were they one the same?
So again, going back to the LinkedIn thing, I would post daily about Zendesk tips, best practice for customer support in general. So everybody kind of knew me as the Zendesk guy on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And when they would hire me, they expected me to do the work and implement the things that I talked about on social, right? Now, I think if I would go back, I would talk about it more on the company page and then reference it from my page to get traffic to there, and then build the impression that there are a couple of people that know how to do this, or that we've designed a repeatable process that anybody on my team could do, or that the buyer of the business could do themselves. So I think that's what it's difficult to do with a one-person business. Omeed, it's kind of like going to your favorite mechanic and that guy's been fixing your car for 10 years. Once he's swapped out with somebody else, even if the brand of the shop stays and even if he passes on as much knowledge as he can, it's not going to be the same, right? So there's probably not much I could have done going back about it, but those are maybe a couple of things that I would have changed.
No, that's super valuable. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it particularly makes sense in the services business, from the services business perspective that we're looking at this. Another thing that comes to mind for me there too is just that, you said a little bit about how you could have just communicated there were other people, but also I feel like more upfront when you were just starting the business, you were really getting into a consultancy business from the get-go. You had seen the opportunity on Upwork.
Upwork, yeah.
You had seen the opportunity on Upwork. You had started getting into it. So you really didn't have that mindset from the get-go that you need to put your business hat on. There I go with that.
Right.
You weren't starting off with, okay, I'm building a whole business. How am I going to communicate this like that? And also this touches on the issue of managing other people. So from the get-go, you were doing it as a consultancy. You didn't have this mindset of, I need to be getting other people in here that are doing the work that helps prepare me to sell this business. That's, however, an extremely important thing that we see all the time in transactions that people need to be really aware of. Buyers don't want to buy a business where the owner is doing all the work. We really said that here in a little bit of different terms, but that's the case. And similarly, when I guess the opposite of that is true. Similarly, I'm saying there. Okay, let me restart because I didn't mean to say I guess. Similarly, the opposite of that is true, which is that people love to buy businesses when you started it from the get-go. Say you had recognized in the beginning that you wanted to sell the business ultimately. Then you recognize, that means there's other people that are going to have to do the services. And people love it when you've implemented systems and processes in place and training to get other people to do all those services on a repeated basis, because from a buyer's perspective, they won't have as much risk if, the key guys leave. Say it's not even you at that point, it's just some key other employees. Then the buyers aren't going to be concerned about, what happens if they leave? Because that's kind of just adds on top of the risk profile of the acquisition. And that's not necessarily like if you, for example, you buy a mechanic shop and there's one guy, and he's the one guy that does all the work. Well, that's not very good from a buyer's perspective. That's not going to be the same acquisition.
Yeah, I think I was lucky that I was a bit organized when I started, right? So from day one, I tracked every dollar that came in and went out of the business in the CRM. So when it came time to sell, I had my P&L already ready to go. So,
Perfect seller. I know it. I already know it.
And then also everything that I did with the implementations, I did document. So if somebody would have came in and worked as a contractor, they would have the step-by-step. So when I did transition to Partner Hero, they just took my process and implemented it across a large team of Zendesk admins. So they already knew what they needed to know. I just had to record a couple of training videos to walk them through the documents that I've built, which is essentially like a discovery document that you go through with every client, get the requirements, and then you build it out in Zendesk. So I was lucky enough to be a little bit organized to get that done.
Not lucky. I would argue that the reason why you probably got 10x your business is because you were organized like that.
Yeah, I agree. I like to pay attention to the details, and I did that from day one, whether it's just freelancing or, putting up a landing page. I wanted the company to look professional. I think that's another reason I got the clients that I got, because I built this brand where they thought that it was much bigger than what it actually was. And when we went through the process, I was organized about doing discovery compared to a lot of other Zendesk admins on Upwork, which are not really familiar with the process. They just know Zendesk as a tool.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
I wanted you guys to keep saying what you're saying, but I want to point out here, or I want to pull out one thing that you just mentioned is you already had the P&L up to speed by the time you decided you want to sell. Just to be clear, before I get to my point, okay, let me just start over. By the way, as a side, did you prepare the P&L? Did you prepare it before you had decided to sell, or is that something you did after you decided to sell?
I didn't even know what a P&L was before I met Christine. But I had everything that I needed to just plug it into her
how interesting.
template, right? So I just had to just.
So you were like, yeah, you just had it. You just naturally were like, dude, I got these numbers, and she was like, this is the P&L. You were like, oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what that was, but I already had it.
I was about to rag on you, maybe. No, because I was about to say, yeah, people need to be doing what he did, have the P&L always up to speed. But you had just gotten up to speed at the sell. Let me shift over real quick back to just as if we're talking on the recording, because I kind of took us out of character. Well, not out of character, whatever the terminology is, took us to an aside there. So let me kind of just, because I just want to just talk about this while we're going through the real process. One thing I want to pull out there that you had mentioned is you had the P&L ready to sell. Now, is that something that you had just been keeping up to speed up to that date, or is it something you just prepared at the time of sale?
So I wasn't conscious about keeping the P&L. I didn't know what the P&L was or the term was, but what I was very detailed about, or what I paid attention to, was the money coming in and going out of the business. I know that needed to be recorded somewhere. So I just used a basic CRM that was provided by Fiverr, another freelance website, and it records every transaction that comes in. So I know how much money I was making by client, by project. And then I also knew how much I was spending for the business. And another tip that I would have for anybody doing a similar type of business as me, services, stay extra lean, right? When we were doing the P&L, the losses for each month or my expenses were $87. And that's just a couple of tools that I used because I knew I didn't need a bunch of things to get the work done. And it was actually a couple of $100s before. And I continuously reduced that amount because I knew at some point that P&L would be looked at, or something would need to happen with the business. So kept expenses low, tracked my income and the expenses, and eventually that was the perfect thing that I needed to plug into the P&L template that my broker shared with me.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that you had the P&L just always going, which is, by the way, something that we recommend founders do, people who are even considering selling their business 12 months later. The worst thing you can do is not have any records whatsoever, or not have anything organized at all. And you're saying, oh, I need to sell the business now, or I just got an offer, or I want to sell the business. Because it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse.
Right.
You need to have all that stuff organized as Christine had walked you through. You had all that stuff put into you had it already organized, right? And you have all that stuff in the financial statements, the profit and loss statement included, completely prepared by the time you're even beginning to outreach to potential buyers. Because if this happens more often than you'd think, it actually might blow your mind, Hosam. Like, are you aware of how often people don't have that?
I could have a sense about it, but I'm not sure. I know the percentage.
So often. It's so bad. It's like sellers are all like, we're representing a buyer when this typically happens, because we would tell the seller this. It wouldn't happen if we were representing the seller, because we'd tell them, we'd be like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, go talk to your accountant.
Get this immediately.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys. Like, what are you selling? If you don't even have the P&L, like, how can you sell something? And so, but we're representing buyers, and then like, we're doing the deal. They were already engaged. Maybe they hadn't got the financial statements yet, so we weren't aware of it. But we're already negotiating contracts. And then the seller says, oh, but we don't have like the last year or the last 2 years. And it's like,
yeah,
what are you doing? It's pretty freaky. It's definitely not all the time. And it's definitely in like sub $10 million deals. But the bigger the deal, the more likely they're already going to have all their accounts prepared.
Right.
Stuff, right. But when it does happen, it definitely triggers Omeed and I. It's just like, not again. So that's kind of something just to call out there, that if you're a founder, having that already set up or having all your stuff organized as you did here is definitely like not just the winning move, but totally necessary and fundamental to the whole process. And that's actually like, that's so important too for just determining your valuation. Like, if you don't even have that information, how could you even really offer the business for selling a price that somebody's willing to buy it at? And when people do that, it's usually what ends up happening is the deal falls through, because the numbers not end up coming at the numbers which the seller had said they would come in at. And now everybody's wasted all their time, weeks of work, advisory fees, etc.
I do have a quick story, and maybe this might shine some light on a couple of things that I'm afraid of. So I told you I never wanted to manage, right? I never wanted to raise money either, because I worked at several startups and know that could get messy. So I never aspired to be like a huge tech founder, right? And I think those fears came from, it was a great place to work while I was there, but those fears came from when I was working at WeWork. So I worked at WeWork right when they started in Manhattan. They only had 3 buildings at the time. And I saw—
Were you at that party, that summer camp party with Adam Newman? Were you at that?
I'm in the trailer for that. If you go on YouTube and watch the summer camp trailer, I'm in the trailer. But
oh my God.
But it was when I was there, it was a really fun time. It was I actually caught the like startup bug when I was there and started a consulting business after I left there, a different one that failed. But yeah, I saw what happened to startups, and that kind of gave me the reasoning to, again, not raise money, not turn into this huge tech founder or tech company, and not build a humongous team that I would be responsible for and possibly let down at some point, right? So I've always been going down the path of freelance, solopreneurship, one-person businesses, and I think I'm going to continue to stay down that path.
I think that's a healthy thing to have, just your own expectations about what you want to do.
Right.
I've definitely seen, and we've seen, let me just put it. We've definitely seen the opposite, where people kind of get themselves stuck in the shoes of the CEO operator, but they just kind of lost for it. You know, they probably could be spending more time on other things. Maybe they already have too much money, and maybe they're now at that moment missing the opportunity to sell their business at its maximum potential value. And they're just kind of in that position, and they have no idea that that's not the best place for them.
Right.
So I think that's really insightful for you to have that thought. It's definitely something we try to propound also to people. It's just be like, do you really want to be working 70-hour weeks when you're in your 40s? It's like, you know, you got to take a step back and you think that the whole thought process right there doesn't make all. Even for people who say they love their job, it's like, even if my job was playing video games, I wouldn't do that for 70 hours. I wouldn't even do it for 40 hours a week. You know, it's like I have better things to do than that too. So
yeah, I think a big part of entrepreneurship at any level is just awareness, right? And like not doing it because it's cool, not doing it because you want the big payout. It's just knowing what you want from it and then getting there. And maybe an exit is the last stop for you. Maybe you actually enjoy the 70 hours a week, like you just like work, so you do it for putting in the hours, right?
We're talking about the why.
Yeah.
The why here, you know? And so let's pose that question to you, Hosam. It sounds like, and this is something that we hear, and it's really interesting watching this pattern and this trend occur over, you know, the trajectory of these podcast episodes. But every founder that we've talked to that has exited a business has been like, I knew my why. And when it wasn't that anymore, I knew that it was time to exit the business. Every single one so far has said that. So I hear you're always going to be solopreneur. You're always going to kind of do like a consultancy service business sort of thing, or maybe not. Maybe not a consultancy or service business. Maybe you'll start a SaaS. But what is your why? What would you say your why is?
Yeah. My why for support ops was to supplement my income, right? I was a customer support agent, don't make a lot of money. And I said, I want to dig myself out of debt. I want to level up in life. And I did that. And once I accomplished that, that's kind of probably a reason why I was ready to sell too, right? Because my why was fulfilled. And I said, I'm all set here. I did what I needed to do. And the why for me to join Partner here or join another company is to learn more. I want to get to the next level of education and, you know, just absorb more stuff and be able to get to the next point in my life, which could be another business where I know how to make it to 7 figures as opposed to 6 figures, right? So that might be my next why. So yeah, the why for me for support ops was literally to supplement income, and I was able to fulfill that.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Omeed, did you have a direct follow-up question? Because I have kind of like a tangential one.
I got a tangential one too.
Why don't you go ahead and I'll follow up with mine.
Okay, mine's just a quick one. Let's play yay or nay. So exits, yay or nay?
Yay.
Yay. More exits, yay or nay?
Yay.
Cool.
SaaS, yay or nay?
I would say yay for the right person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But like really the question is like, have you caught the exit bug? Like, are you like, I love exits and I want, we've like talked to a few people that are like, oh my God, like I want to be just like launching as many products as possible and just selling them off. Like,
yeah. I mean, the reason I got on acquire.com in the first place was because I was browsing businesses to potentially buy after shutting down my business, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, let me throw my business on there and see if anybody's interested. So I've been fascinated with M&A since, Andrew started posting about it. Again, like bringing it back to LinkedIn, I followed him like, wow, this content's really cool. People are buying and flipping homes. Why aren't they buying and flipping businesses, which they are now, right?
That was going to be my question was what other sources of online, like what the question was going to be, what was any other place online that you looked or would have looked for M&A related learning? And that was just like a question for me to think about, what is somebody else doing? Really?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't look anywhere else. I looked at the couple of sites that were out there. I liked Andrew's site because of, super clean UI, focus on tech. And it just looked like a really good platform. So I stuck with that and learned there. And actually, going back to something we were talking about maybe half an hour ago, Joe, another reason I sold or listed it is because I wanted to learn the M&A process, right? Mm-hmm. So you only learn how to do something if you go ahead and try it. So I wanted to learn how to build a business. So I went and built the business, right? I got my, LLC, business bank account, learned marketing, learned sales, learned everything from scratch. So now I could confidently say, I know how to build a decent 6-figure business, right? I wanted to learn how to sell a business. So what better way to learn how to sell a business than to actually go sell a business? Listed it. And then now I learned the process. And I'm grateful to Christine because she brought me onto the team. And now I'm working deals with them because I do love exits and I love the benefits for the seller and I love the benefits for the buyer. So I will be sticking around the M&A scene for a while. I hope that answered a part of your question, Omeed.
Yeah, totally answered my question.
Yeah.
In terms of like, we either see, I feel like entrepreneurs always kind of find their way back to business, like one way or another. And usually people who have had one exit, it's, I think, more likely for them to have multiple exits. But then there's some people that like get to experience an exit and that's what they love. Like it's actually not even necessarily about the business itself. They just love the exit process or like they love exits. So, it can, and then there are people that think that they're never going to go back to business and then they just can't help but go back to business. And then those people may or may not find themselves like as part of another exit. They're kind of like more like wayward, kind of lost, like not sure that they love business, but they do. They just don't know that they do,
When you said like some people just love exits, I feel like you really gave an image in my head to me of the exact opposite of the image in my head of the typical technical reticent founder who's like, built this great tool really into the technical stuff, into the product, into growing it, versus the guy who's like, man, I want the exit. I can't get in the picture. It's like growing it. And then the guy who's like, man, I want the exit. Like it's a very different mindset. It's just very clear when you say that to me. And I like that so much because like having your clear objectives in mind from the get-go, going back to sellability too, but just like life objectives and business objectives is so vital. And if from the get-go, you're just ready mentally, you're like, okay, I am going to sell this business. I love doing that. It's completely different from a person who's like, I don't know what selling is.
Yeah. Or I want to hold this business forever, which is like another, they just don't even like exits.
It's common.
It depends if you're passionate about the problem or passionate about the cash, right? Just to like simplify it. Like if you're passionate about the problem and you want to continue to solve the problem, I don't see somebody exiting.
I
for the right price.
I hear you.
I disagree.
But I don't.
Okay.
Sorry, what'd you say, Omeed?
Oh, I was just disagreeing, but go ahead, Joe.
Oh, okay. And I was just gonna say, well, I mean, like, well, Omeed loves money. So, so let's start there.
That's true. I do love money. I do.
But going on to what I was gonna say that, like, well, but what's so wrong with building a business that solves it? Like, you don't need to be the guy solving the problem. You can build a business that solves the problem, and you can make money for it, and then you can go solve another problem while that business continues to solve that problem. So I was really trying to state that the dichotomy you made there about these two things isn't something I necessarily agree with, but I definitely think those are valid points you're making. I just think there's more options there, more probable outcomes. Like, and that really
totally
should be a seller's goal.
I agree with that.
And that should be a seller's goal, right? Like, here's this, I built this thing over here that solves the problem. My hands, I can't fit my Italian hand gestures into this tiny camera space. It's not working for me at all. And I'm like, keep doing this. And that's all I got. And so essentially, the perspective should be from the get-go. How can I build this other thing? I'm doing it. I can't help myself. How can I build this other thing that solves this problem? And how can I not be doing anything for that business? That's definitely the mindset people should be having. That's the mindset I have.
Yeah. Hosam, I heard you say, like, it's almost like a balance, it's like a trade-off. Like, do you love solving the problem or do you love money, essentially? And Joe's like, yeah, Omeed loves money. But then to Joe's point, it's in terms of, it's really actually interesting for your story, Hosam, because I heard you say you wanted to learn about exits. Like, you didn't necessarily think about exits. One of your takeaways was plan from the exit from the very beginning, but then you also kept such detailed records of your business. And so in a lot of ways, you were already planning for the exit of your business from the very beginning, even though you didn't even necessarily know that that's what you were doing. But when it came time, you had everything that you needed to sell the business in a graceful way because you had done the things that you needed to do to build the foundation to sell the business. And so there's like an interesting, almost like paradox there. And so to that point, the picture that like I'm really trying to paint is like, I think that for experienced business people, thinking about selling your business is a must. Like, intentionality with the design of the business going into it, in terms of, yes, I'm here to solve this problem and I enjoy solving this problem. Of course, that's like a necessity. You have to enjoy solving the problem and have a passion for solving the problem. And at the same time, to build, like, excellence is a really important value at our law firm in terms of personal excellence. And so, like, how can we do things optimally and best and so on and so forth? And for a business owner, going in, crushing the problem and crushing your business, like, why wouldn't anyone want that in terms of being able to let go of the business at its highest value because you've built a truly valuable asset? I think that any business owner would say that that's what they would want.
So I was gonna say, do you guys know the guy that runs MicroConf? He released a couple of books about building SaaS businesses, profitable SaaS businesses. He has a podcast. He's also on YouTube. He's huge on YouTube. I'll send you the information later. I don't have his name, but he sold his company for tens of millions of dollars. And he was so passionate about the problem that when he did sell the company, he was really upset at during the exit, right? Although he was getting so much money, he was no longer solving the problem that he wanted to continue solving. So that's kind of what I meant about, people that are serial business exiters, I guess, versus somebody that wants to hold a company, right? So in his case, he knew that selling was the best option. It was the right time, but he felt like he lost a huge part of his life by exiting. It's a really interesting story, and he has such great content. So I'll make sure to send you guys that info later.
Please. But, and I hear you, by the way.
Yeah. That's all totally. I had, really.
No, that's a super interesting, like, little distinction too. It's like, yeah, you can have a dope business, you can, be ready to sell it, and there's a third layer where you can also, have your feelings about selling the business, which we see a lot of that too, in terms of sellers that like have trouble letting go of the business or releasing the business. We do see that a lot too.
I mean, if you work on something for long enough, like you can't help but get tied up in it. Well, I mean, I guess you can help and not have that happen, but it's just so common. I know that with our law firm, it'll probably be that way after a few more years. We'll like self-identify with it. And I already like the name a lot. It's Optimist, it's Optimist. And I have to tell people, and this is like one of my favorite parts of introducing the law firm. I say, it's Optimist Legal, not Optimus Prime, like the Transformers. Optimist. And, I like the brand, and it's really easy to come associated with the brand, especially with a services-oriented business, as you talked about earlier with yours. So, I mean, yeah.
Especially as we breathe more life into it and it starts to like actually take on like our persona to a great degree, which we haven't really done that much.
I'm used to like being with some like other big corp brand, insert big corp brand here. In the hands. And, it is what it is. Those are very important things, and company culture are really important things. But when you're doing your own, and especially when you're in this situation of having to sell your own, I've done that one time before where we had to sell it. Well, it was a more complex transaction than that, but ultimately the business was sold, and the current owners just don't have the same culture. I don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah. Hopefully they watch this.
It's okay. He whispered, so they're not going to hear.
I hope they do.
Yeah,
they're not even confident.
Good thing we didn't see your hand gestures for that one.
God, so like it's just kind of like, and they're also not solving for the problem that we were solving for, which is super annoying. So again, I hear what you're saying there on that point.
Which brings us to a really interesting place in the conversation that I want to like make sure and talk about, which is integration. What was that acqui-hire process like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Omeed. So like I told you, we originally agreed on a contractor relationship, right? So I was working for another company and I was selling support ops. Partner Hero agreed to buy it. So I only had a couple of hours a week to continue contracting with Partner Hero to make the transition, right? And we passed on the knowledge. I did training with their team. So they were just starting to build a similar service. That's why the acquisition made sense, because they were already looking into something like this. But buying support ops was more of a turnkey solution for them. So I started out as a contractor there. And we both immediately knew, like after a couple of months, that we could take it so much further if I was there full time. So we had integrated as much as we could.
Pause 1 second. Like I'm talking about like, so you had all these clients, like, did you have to send an email to the
so you're talking about, I could go into
I want to even
tactical.
Yeah.
So how it went was purchase agreement was signed. And immediately after, we contacted Zendesk because I had a partner agreement with them, made sure that was transferred over to Partner Hero so they would inherit that partnership with Zendesk and get commissions paid out when, business was brought over to them. And then we slowly started to phase out the support ops brand. So the first thing we did was move the services that I had on the support ops website to the Partner Hero website. So now if you go there, you'll see it under managed services. And then we did like a redirect to the domain. So we shut down the website, but they had the domain going to Partner Hero's website. Everywhere we could on the in the marketplaces and on social, we put, support ops in parentheses acquired by Partner Hero, emailed all of my contact list. So not only my clients, but my entire contact list in Gmail, which was thousands of people that I've interacted with, let them know. We actually wanted to take advantage of this event and make it a big marketing, make a big marketing splash about it. So we did a bunch of things on social to let people know. We sent out the emails, as I mentioned. We hit up a couple of Slack communities and said, hey, Support Ops is rebranded and now we're, bigger than ever and we're able to support more customers in more ways. So we really wanted to take advantage of this event and we did that in many ways. But that was the transition for the brand. And then we had the transition for, the actual work. So I was there
which I think you were talking about.
Yeah. I was there helping out with a couple of projects and leading that team until they knew how to lead their own projects. I work with a great colleague of mine, Craig. He's been in the space for a long time. He's like a tech genius coder. He knows CX, knows Zendesk in and out. So it was a perfect handoff to him. But yeah, I think the integration went really well.
Cool. And so you were there. They were like, they saw this as a turnkey solution. That's why they acquired you. They brought you on initially as a contractor. You kind of described the process of moving everything over. They, contacted your entire contact list everywhere, support ops was listed. They made sure, and tied it to the acquisition. So what about the acqui-hire integration? So they brought you on as a contractor, right. What did that process look like of shifting to employee? And then it's interesting because I also heard you say that you wanted to not be involved with support ops at all. So did you?
Yeah. So I knew what I didn't like about the business, right? I didn't like the fulfillment, but I loved customer acquisition. So sales and marketing was something I wanted to continue to do. I couldn't build my own team at support ops. They had the team, so it made sense. So after contracting for 3 months, I was in a Slack channel with them. We kept talking about like, oh, what if we did this? What if we did that? And I just basically needed more hours with the team that I didn't have. So essentially I told my previous employer that it makes sense for me to, follow my company and continue to grow it there. And they took me on, and it was just kind of like a mutual agreement. They knew that they wanted me on the team. I knew I wanted to be on the team, and it was pretty simple, to be honest.
And so it almost sounds like you have a department under you at this company, and you get to just lead the thing that you really love, because I'm sure Partner Hero has like their own marketing department, right? Marketing and sales, but like you're continuing to do marketing and sales almost as like a visionary for the support ops acquisition that is now Partner Hero. You're like just continuing to grow the thing that you were creating just under Partner Hero's umbrella. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So the first phase was basically to make sure that the company was still running within Partner Hero, right? So we just had to continue doing the things that we were doing under the Partner Hero brand. Once that was good to go, and that was really during the contractor time, we looked at everything and essentially built this brand new team. It's myself, director of strategy, my boss, Mercer, she runs the entire department, and then Craig on the delivery side. And then he has an entire team under him that does the fulfillment. We sat down and we said, okay, if we were building support ops from scratch, what would we do? So exactly to your point, Joe, we built a recurring model now because we were able to support it, right? So all of our customers now are recurring, some of my existing customers and some of their customers that they already had. So that's how we were able to flip it. So now everything that I wanted to do with support ops, I have the support and the knowledge and resources to do it at Partner Hero. So we were able to take those risks because, I wasn't relying on that paycheck coming from an individual customer to pay my bills. And again, it's been just such a good integration, and we were able to do so much more than I was able to do by myself.
Joe, if you have any follow-up questions on integration, you can feel free to ask.
By the way, that was a really great question, Omeed. I mean, that's a super essential part of the process that, really lends itself towards a lot of those teamwork skills and communication skills that a marketing expert like yourself might have. But for other people, they need to kind of really enter that process knowing that so much of that is necessary to make it a success. There's definitely a common issue where the seller's team isn't really ready to integrate it's kind of a little bit of reverse here, but isn't ready to integrate a new team lead or owner in a different circumstance. And that can lead to some really significant problems if that new person coming in doesn't have all those skills. So I'm really happy to hear that in your case, it worked out. And I mean, you seem like a great professional. You seem like somebody. I'm actually implementing Freshdesk on something currently, which, by the way, Omeed is like Zendesk. So in other words, it's a thing he does. And so, we're not doing anything complicated that would necessitate services, but hell, I'd love to work with you or give you a call or a text.
Yeah, and anytime for sure.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I was just going to add something to Joe's point there, just adding a little bit more to integration. If you even ask Christine, when I was looking for a buyer, I was actually pretty picky because I knew I would have to spend some time with the business. So we actually had a couple of leads that come in that gave us LOIs that I said, no, I don't want to, sell to this company because it's just not going to make sense for them. It's not going to make sense for me. And they're likely going to just shut down the business or it would have been a bad investment for them. So again, going back to reputation, I didn't want somebody to have a bad experience even buying my company and running it. So when I contacted Partner here, I already knew a couple of people that worked there and we got on a call immediately and we already had that vibe together and we connected right away. So I said, you know what, this is where I want my company to go. And if I'm going to work there, that's where I want to go as well. So it's important for some sellers to vet the buyer to make sure if they're going to stay for 12 months to integrate the company, that they're actually going to enjoy their time there and it's going to be a successful integration. If they're just looking to dump their company and, they don't care about the experience for the buyer, it's not going to be a good relationship and it's going to go really in a bad direction.
1,000,000%. Yeah, no, that's spot on. Again, was that something your broker, Christine, had pointed out? I'm sorry if you had already mentioned, or is it something that you had just thought on your own initiative?
Yeah, no, I told you I came up with a short list of companies I wanted to kind of cold DM, and I vetted these companies and their founders and their employees before I even pitched them. So it kind of just came from me and Christine agreed. She's like, hey, if you're going to be working with this company, make sure that you sell it to the right person.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I wish more brokers or people would say, just be picky, because then people just like you said, post sale is even worse, but those sales might not even happen because they might realize halfway through the sale that it's not going to work out. And now you've spent all this time and it's really annoying when that happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's a really great point to raise. I actually don't have any more follow-up questions now. I mean, I'm sure I could think of some if I were given a minute, but how about you, Omeed?
Just want to make a point to what Hosam just shared in terms of, I think the stat is 60% of mergers and acquisitions die during the integration phase or post-integration just because the deals don't make sense themselves. And I feel taking these things into consideration, how do the two parties interact with one another? Simple things like that. Yeah. Do the cultures match? Does the deal make sense outside of the fact that, the numbers are great? It actually has to make sense outside of just the numbers being great in order for deals to really work in the long term. And I feel if sellers were just as cognizant of it as buyers are, the way that you were, and kind of both parties really intentionally come together, with a meeting of the minds in such a clear way on so many different levels, both on culture as well as numbers, as well as, clarity on what the intention of the acquisition itself is. So many more acquisitions I feel would be more successful. That's that point. And then, we have Hosam here. He's a customer service expert who, and customer service is such an important aspect of SaaS businesses. So we would be missing a real opportunity if we didn't get some insights from Hosam on customer service.
Oh, I love it.
So yeah, man, if we were SaaS founders and, we're looking to sell our business, what advice would you give us from the customer support and customer service front?
Yeah, so I always looked at customer support as one of the main features of a SaaS product, right? Especially when I was working customer support in SaaS, because a lot of times these days, there aren't too many differentiators when it comes to hard features or actual software features. But if you have two products that are side by side, they've already lowered their prices to match each other. The big differentiator is, okay, what's the sales process look like? Is it easy for me to sign up to the SaaS product? And what does customer support look like when I'm in trouble, right? Those are some key differentiators in the market today, especially with, hate to bring it up, but AI, right? Everybody's building the same tool out there today. And if your customer support isn't standout, it's just not going to be a good product, right? So every SaaS company and tech company I work for, they really cared about customer support. And I think I got that a little bit when I was building my business, is like making sure the customer experience is excellent and not letting it fall through the cracks because you want to prioritize product. I know there's going to be product people and engineers out there that say, product is number one, just worry about that. Customer support comes second. But I think you should be working on both at the same time. If you have excellent customer support from day one, customers are going to be way more forgiving when something goes wrong than when, you ignore them for a couple of years and then out of nowhere start building your customer support organization. So by having excellent support, I would argue that your valuation of your company will actually go higher, right? Because you care about the customer cares about you. And again, they're going to continue buying from you if that's the case.
Yeah, and so one thing you noted there is excellent customer support. And in my mind, that comes to like response timing, like whether or not you solve the solution your first try, so the knowledge of the customer support specialist. But for you, what does excellence mean if you have a few quantitative measures or otherwise?
Yeah, I would say excellent support just starts with getting a response, right? Getting some kind of acknowledgement that the company hears you. And the next one is probably going to be setting the expectation. So if I know a problem is going to take 3 days to solve, if I tell you up front, Joe, the problem is going to take a minimum of 3 days because we have to send it to our engineering team. They have to debug. They have to find the issues. It might not be a priority. If I tell you all of that up front, you know what's coming, right? But if I say, Joe, we received your ticket and I ghost you for a week, you have no idea. Even if it's something really small, you just automatically know that when there's going to be a big problem, we're going to treat it the same way and we're just going to leave you in the dark. So sending an immediate response, whether automated or through a human, and then setting the expectations. Again, you could do this in an automated fashion. So once the ticket is received, you send them an automated message back saying, hey, Joe, thanks for reaching out. We typically respond within 24 hours, and we're open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. So if you're sending a message outside that time, not to expect an answer and not to bug the company before the 24-hour mark, right? So expectation setting is huge, and it's a very underrated thing that customer support teams are missing, especially in SaaS.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense there. Is there one other key thing you'd say that comes to excellent customer support?
I would say it's being real. Things happen and people have bad days. And, when you're talking to a customer, if you treat them like you're a robot and just sending these generic messages, they're just going to get more frustrated. But if you give them the time and hear them out and say like, okay, I know this feature is not working for you. We're not going to fix it for a month, but what else could I do for you? I just want to hear you out. Tell me everything about my business that you don't like. And sometimes they just need to vent. And then once they get over venting, they have that personal, when I was in customer support, I was working for an ISP in Manhattan. Customers would call and ask to speak to me because we had a previous conversation and I kind of knew them at that point. It was a small ISP, so we had like a couple thousand customers. But you want to build that relationship where they trust you and they take your word because you're honest about what's going on. If I tell them your internet's going to be out for a week and that's it, but maybe I could send you a hotspot in the meantime. They love that, you just put in the effort. So again, just be human on both sides, right? A customer should treat the customer agent with respect and as they're a human, and the other way around, right? Like don't make it a transaction. Don't be too professional. It's one human helping the other, to be honest.
Oh, that's really cool. I like that. Yeah, I definitely think that's lost, especially with like offshore customer support who aren't really, they already have that cultural barrier with how Americans are and stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. Omeed, do you have any other questions about customer service?
Yeah, I got like maybe one or two more. So
go for it.
So, you've been acqui-hired by Partner Hero. What is the problem that you're currently solving for SaaS businesses and how do you solve it?
So the problem we're solving for SaaS businesses, so I think what happens in smaller SaaS companies, or maybe you guys have more experience, but in all of SaaS companies, is there is no organization when it comes to, let's say, customer information. So how many times have you worked with a SaaS company and their CRM is a mess, right? Their sales CRMs are Salesforce, HubSpot. The data is just all over the place. And similar in customer support, right? There's no automation. Tickets are going missing. Customers are not getting answered. So again, a big mess of data. What we're trying to do is we're trying to help not only SaaS businesses, but all small businesses adopt best practices before hiring like a full-time Zendesk admin. So the service we provide now is like a fractional or a part-time Zendesk admin at a very low cost. It's less than $2,000 a month, but you get all of the expertise of an entire Zendesk admin team. And we build your Zendesk in a way that you're organized from day one. Your customers are getting the best responses from day one. You have top of the line automation from day one. So similar to how I had my CRM set up for my own business from day one, and that saved me in the long run with the P&L. We try to do that for customer support teams that are small, SaaS, e-commerce, because it's really not top of the mind for them, and they don't have the resources to hire a full-time Zendesk admin. So they come to us and they say, hey, just handle this for us. Make sure it's an excellent experience for our customers. And they're willing to pay, a couple $1,000s a month for that.
Yeah, I mean, totally makes sense. Yeah. And talking about higher valuation from focusing on customer service. I mean, one of our guests said it best, churn is a deadly word in SaaS, and, customer service is one of the ways to ensure that you keep churn rates down so that, you can just show the annual recurring revenue coming in consistently and so on and so forth, and really smash those recurring revenue expectations so that you can command that high multiple. So yeah, customer service is a super important skill. And it's kind of interesting, are you a big fan of, who's that guy from Vegas? Tony Su he was from Zappos, I think.
He wrote a book.
He wrote the
I didn't read the book.
Zappos.
I didn't follow him, but I've heard of him. I think one of our assignments at one of my old customer support jobs was to read the book. I didn't pick it up though. but I know he's legendary when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, he started the whole and I'm curious what you think about this. Is going to be my last question. What do you think about the Tony Zhu model? Is what Amazon took and implemented, which if you've ever talked to Amazon customer service, if you say any sort of problem, they'll just refund you.
Right.
They'll just immediately refund you. And that's their approach to customer service, which they got from Tony, because Tony's whole thing was, you buy these shoes from Zappos, and if you love them, fantastic. If you don't, for any reason, we will always accept returns. People could reach out to them, sometimes a year later or something, 2 years later, and be like, I don't like these shoes anymore. I want to return them. And you'd be like, cool, we got you. Right. I don't know if that's the exact approach to customer service, but you do see it with Amazon. No matter what your problem is, you reach out, you get a refund. What are your kind of thoughts on that model?
I think when that model was created, it was a good model. I think what's happening today is customers are taking advantage of that now, right? And there is such thing as a bad customer. So customer could buy it. It could be a great product. And they're like, I want to swap it for a newer model. Let me just go ahead and return it, because they'll take anything, right? So it ruins that incentive that people with actual problems with the product have to return it, right? So I think my philosophy now is make things right, but don't necessarily refund, right? Because I want to find out what went wrong and fix that for you. And it's not necessarily just send me the product back and I'll send you a new one, or I'll just give you your money back and keep the product, because I think that's eventually going to be a failing model. I don't mean to go on a tangent now, but I watched a couple of YouTube videos the other day, and all of our Amazon returns are going into landfills, right? You open something like that microphone you have, Omeed, if you send that back after a day, it's not going to get resold. It's going to get thrown out, or maybe hopefully resold as a used product. But most of the stuff, like clothes, that's going into landfill. So I don't believe in that return model anymore, the refund model. It's kind of okay, where did we go wrong? Let's make it right by maybe sending you another product, or, just finding a different solution than just here's your money back, throw it out.
No, it's really embarrassing. There's another e-commerce company that I'm aware of, I'm not going to name them, that they'll even just throw out, based off of warehouse inventory management, if they have overstocking, they'll just throw out the overstock.
Right.
And it's just I really hate that stuff.
Yeah.
But if that's your last question, Omeed, I also didn't have any last questions. So why don't we go ahead and take this to a close?
Yeah. So in terms of close, Hosam, hit us with a tip of the day. What's your tip of the day?
My tip of the day is if you want to build a business, go ahead and build a business, right? If you want to sell a business, go ahead and sell a business. The only way to get started is to actually get started and not being afraid of doing so. You could always start small. Again, I started on Upwork a couple of hours a week, and compared to all of the M&A deals out there, mine is probably the smallest M&A deal that you could get. But that one small deal changed my life. And if you start on a project yourself today, who knows, you might sell it and it might change your life. So I tell everybody, like, don't be afraid of the terms, M&A, P&L. I didn't know what any of that meant when I went to build my business or sell my business. You shouldn't go out there and feel like you need to learn the entire process of everything before doing it. So just get out there and start something, and hopefully it is sellable at some point.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And again, calling out a little shout out to Christine at the Magnolia firm you worked with on your transaction. And she's awesome. We know her, that. So
yeah, she's great. I highly recommend working with her. Or if you can't get in contact with her for any reason, if you had another broker, work with another broker, right? I think what I've seen was people get really greedy about their sale. And Joe, we talked earlier about me possibly being able to sell for more. I never think about that and say, oh, I wish I increased it by 100K or whatever, because at the end of the day, the broker is helping you get past that finish line. And if you say like, oh, I'm going to go do it on my own, I don't want to pay the broker a couple of thousand that you're going to pay. Or in your example, I don't want to pay a lawyer to help me read the purchase agreement. That could be the biggest mistake you make in the entire process. So it's worth paying out the commissions. They're likely going to get you more than what you could get by yourself. So yeah, get a broker, get a lawyer, do things the right way. And while you're building your business, get an accountant and somebody to help you prep your taxes. Like, hire professionals when you need them.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed there. Well, with that, is there anything that you'd like to plug as part of, before we get off here today?
Yeah, I'm actually running a new program. My new solopreneur journey is I want to educate people on starting their freelance journey. So I started a course that's called Lunchtime Solopreneur. And the idea behind it is, you could take 1 hour a day, whether it's on your lunch period or after work, to get on Upwork and find the skill that you could sell and essentially start that solopreneur journey yourself. So that course is going to go live in a couple of months, but the landing page is up. It's lunchtimesolopreneur.com. You can go drop your email address there and you'll be the first one to access that course when it's ready.
That's awesome, dude. I love the name too. I think that's sick. I appreciate that. I'm going to check it out myself.
Awesome.
Sweet. Well, hey, we really appreciate having you on with us today, and I look forward to talking with you again in the future.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Omeed.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Hosam. I'm your host, Omeed.
And I'm your co-host, Joe.
Later, everyone.
Thanks, Hosam. Take care.
Thank you.